sellers trying to set up accounts with brand new businesses, and you're not going to have the required documentation that is required for Amazon to do that. So for example, when you set up a brand new business, whether it's an LLC or a corporation, that doesn't matter. It's the fact that a business bank account is always attached to that. So the entity's name needs to match the banking name, and you actually have to have a proper bank statement and not a transaction statement, which some people seem to think is in replace of a bank statement, and that will not work. You actually need a bank statement, which is usually only generated 30 days. Most businesses will generate them at month end. Some of them do different date ranges, but the majority of them will be always on a monthly cycle. So you will not even have that bank statement until that 30 days is up. So you need to have that. So the very soonest you could actually look to create a seller account with a business is at least 30 days after the business is established. So you have that. If you want to set it up as
what if you start as an individual? Is that still okay?
Yeah, if you start, yes, you can start as an individual, either under an individual, either by selecting individual or even a professional account. So the difference between those two, of course, is that fee, right? We all know that. So on an individual account, you don't have the $39.99 fee. If you were in the UK, it's $47.99 because there is a VAT charged on that, or in Canada, the GST. But that prevents that, right? But eventually you will have to upgrade that. But yes, you can start as an individual or you can start as a professional using your own personal name and your personal bank account. And then once you establish your business, get all the necessary documents, you could then go ahead and upgrade from a person to the business. And the thing, what we like to tell people, is we've all talked about this, the three of us, is that we want to just let Amazon know in advance that you're going to do that, so they don't believe that there's any, as quote, shady activity going on, that they know it is you're making that upgrade, and normally there's no problem. I just like to give people like them the notice so they don't freeze your account. And then what they'll do is you'll have to go through the tax filing document, because a business tax return file might be different than your personal one. So it'll just be going through that tax questionnaire again and redoing it. But you can definitely do that. And at that time, even when you're ready to go selling, you would want to upgrade to a professional account, because many times Amazon will downgrade you to an individual account again to prevent having to refund you $39.99 when you haven't been selling for a few months.
You could start as an individual, start as the non-professional account. So until you start selling, go professional. Once you start selling enough units that you really think you should convert into a business, that's when you can do so, or do you need to do it before then?
It's just a preference of what somebody wants for their books and how they want to maintain it. They can start their business they can sign up as the individual, leave it go while they work out all their other details, be working on setting up the business, which many people do, set up the business. Once that business gets to 60 days, 45, 60 days, they'll just go ahead and turn it over, because again, it's a preference, but what people will want is that little bit of protection to have that business between the business name and the personal name. And that's why a lot of people do the LLC, right? It gives you that additional protection from your name. And so they want to have that in place before you start. Now, the one thing that Amazon is doing a lot lately, which I probably should have said before, is they are doing a lot more verifications on accounts, and not only to the fact that they're making sure the documents match 100%, but they are either doing video calls with people. They were doing video calls probably 2 to 3 years ago, where they'll actually make sure you have it, and you will have to have all your paperwork with you at that time. So even though you might have submitted the paperwork through the system, if they do a video call with you, have that paperwork available at that time as well, in case they ask you to hold
Is
anything
that with a
up.
live person, or we're just you're going to
Yes.
be sort of holding a bit of paperwork up, going, "This is me, this is my face, these are my documents"?
No, at times it can be a live person, and sometimes it's a recording. And the other thing that they're doing is they're also mailing postal cards out. Yes, good old mail. Even if you're in a different country, they will send a card with you with a verification number. So they'll start the process of the account setup. And then before they do the final verification, they'll send out a card. They'll let you know when it's arriving, roughly. There'll be a tracking number and everything through the mail. And then once that card is in, you have X amount of days. I'm not going to give you a set number because I've heard sometimes 7 days, and I've heard 14 as well. But then as soon as you get that card, you then have to go in and complete the activation of the rest of the steps on Amazon. And again, they're doing that a lot more now to avoid the fake seller accounts. They're trying to do everything possible to prevent these people, setting up false accounts so they can do, what many people like to say, black hat tactics, and that's what they're trying to prevent. So they are trying to nail down verification. So it is really critical. It seems stupid, but if you make sure everything is 100% accurate and matching from the beginning, you're less likely to have any problems as you move forward. And if you have a seller account already, this is really critical. Do not try and create a seller account with the same name. That is not allowed. But what is allowed
A
is if
different
you have a
name, different
separate,
bank account as well,
yes,
right? And
yeah, like a
credit
different
card or
entity.
yeah.
Everything should be separate. Yeah, you should have a different entity. And if there's ever a question about that, you can always call them and say, hey, I have this particular business, and this one's owned by me, but I have this other business and it's myself and another partner, totally different. That's not a problem. You just don't want to create, something in my name. Like I set up an account in Tracy and then I'm trying to set up another account in Tracy. You will get flagged and potentially get blocked, and that can actually hurt you. So you want to make sure that you either use a new account, an existing account that you have, or if you're creating another business, which happens, many people have 2 or 3 Amazon seller accounts because they're different Amazon businesses, and that's totally acceptable as long as it has all that separate information and it relates to that particular company. So that kind of comes more into play if you have different companies. Not necessary, of course, you won't have a different person, you or yourself, right?
No, setting up a company might be quite new to a lot of people. So what are the main benefits of actually having a company rather than having your personal seller account?
I mean, I personally, for me, I would say if you don't have your company set up in the beginning and you want to start the process just so you can get your listing created and all that, you can do it in your individual name. For me personally, and you guys can add to this, I would prefer to have my business set up before I started selling anything. So I would have that protection of whether it even be just an LLC. In the United States, we have our LLCs. They're not very difficult to set up, but you do get that level of protection between yourself and the business from your personal assets. So if, for say, there was any issue, you do have that leverage. And for me, that's how I would do it. However, I know that there are a lot of people that will do under their name and doing business as, which kind of protects their name, doesn't protect them from their personal assets. But it just depends on where you are and how much the setup is. Like, for example, I know in California, it's not as cheap to maybe register your company in that state. There's a lot of additional fees associated with that.
Mhm.
So somebody in that state may look at setting up using a service such as I think like LegalZoom or Trademarky or some of those other services to create a company in another state like Wyoming and Delaware, like a lot of people use. It's a possibility. In the state that I'm actually located in, for me to set up a business, it was like $125. So it's not a big deal. So I think it just kind of comes down to
Yeah, I think for some
understanding
people
it.
that can still be a little bit daunting, and
Mhm.
for those they just go ahead with a personal account
Yeah.
until they need to go to business.
Yeah.